This week's episode was originally broadcast in July 2025 during our Social Talent Live webinar. Visit socialtalent.com/live to make sure you catch our next event.
But let's get started. I'd like to welcome our guest for the first discussion of the event, Rachel Allen. Rachel, thanks a million for joining me on Social Talent Live.
It would help if I came off mute, wouldn't it? I am happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thanks so much, Rachel. Really appreciate that. Right. Yes, it is a help to actually come off mute and come on stage. That does work for us, right? So I want to basically start at the beginning.
Okay.
So, Rachel, can you maybe, first of all, if you don't mind, introduce 7-Eleven to, perhaps there's two people on the call who might never have heard of the brand. Could you give me maybe some context to 7-Eleven, the scale of the organization, what you do, the markets you operate in, and even the kind of hires you make and what kind of volume of hiring you typically do in a typical year before we kick in?
Sure. So 7-Eleven is the largest convenience store in the US and Canada. So I do like to differentiate where I work for what's called 7-Eleven Inc., which is just US and Canada. However, we are a big, massive brand, a global brand. So everyone around the globe is familiar with 7-Eleven as a brand. But I work for 7-Eleven Inc., which operates US and Canada only. And within US and Canada, we have about 13,000 total locations. We do over 100,000 hires a year. And we are the largest convenience store within the US and Canada. And we've got, for globally though, we have about 84, 85 locations in over 19 countries. So a large presence globally as well. And then some of the brands you may not be familiar with that are as a part of our family of brands. We also have Laredo Taco and Raise the Roost. Laredo Taco is a restaurant, Raise the Roost too. And then we also had the acquisition of Speedway several years ago at this point, but the Speedway brand is also within our family of brands. Our mission is to make our customers' day a little more awesome by delivering fast and personalized convenience where you are, when you want it, how you want it. And we've been able to do that pretty successfully for almost 100 years. So we just celebrated our 98th birthday this July 11th. So Slurpee Day, 7-Eleven Day is on July 11th. In Australia, though, we actually celebrate Slurpee Day on November 7th. And we will be hitting our 100-year mark in just 2 years, which is crazy.
Rachel, I never told you this, but 7-Eleven used to be in Ireland, and there was a 7-Eleven down beside my high school when I was 12, 13 years of age. And I would go down every single day and with my lunch money buy a big Slurpee cola. And I was obsessed with all things 7-Eleven.
It's one of the coolest parts. It's just the nostalgic aspect of it. When it's fun to listen to everybody's stories, but there's always a fond memory for 7-Eleven.
Well, I want to dig into the topic of today's session. And that's, what problem were you actually trying to solve for when you begun exploring the potential use of AI in talent acquisition? Could you maybe share that story and dig into it a bit more?
Yeah, so I'm actually a boomerang. So this is my second time back at 7-Eleven. I was here back in 2010 to 2015, and then just came back almost 4 years ago at this point. And so just to set the stage, give a little bit of context of what I was walking into when I came back, we had just completed the acquisition of Speedway. And Legacy 7-Eleven was highly franchised. Legacy Speedway was 100% corporate, not franchised at all. So it was a blending of not just cultures and brands, but also the models. So that did contribute some unique challenges that we were facing in the hiring at the time. However, some of the main challenges that we saw through hiring were across both of our brands, and I would argue probably across anyone going through the hiring at that time. We found on both sides it was really a slow manual process and our store leaders were strapped for time. With the limited time that they had, they weren't getting to that need. So it was this vicious cycle, right? Like they didn't have the time to do the hiring, but they desperately needed the hiring in order to give them the time to do other stuff. So we saw this slow, very manual process. We had a large issue with candidate drop off. So throughout the process, at dropping off, even just at the early beginning of the stage, but then also no showing at interviews, and then also no showing on day one. So we were really struggling with getting candidates to show up for us. And then the competition was really, really high. And because we weren't, acting fast enough, right? Our candidates were taking a job down the street within the days that we were taking to get through them. So while there was the complexity of the acquisition that we had just done, and we had two totally different worlds, and for Legacy 7-Eleven, we hadn't done a ton of the hiring because franchisees do their own hiring, right? We do not support in that way. But by bringing on Speedway, we now were engrossed in this high volume hiring, which was kind of new to us. So those were some of the challenges that we were facing at the time. And like I said, I would argue that I think most companies were really seeing it then.
So you of course do a certain amount of corporate hiring, corporate role hiring, called the more longer term professional white collar roles.
Yeah.
But volume hiring is where you had, let's say, that sudden pain, and you had to identify a solution really, really quickly. So tell us about that. Tell me about, why was volume hiring such an on fire area for you, and maybe walk us through some of those technical challenges you also faced.
Yeah, so high volume is definitely the majority of our hiring when you look at pure numbers. And it's the heart of our business is our stores and our operations. And our candidates are our customers, and they weren't getting the best experience, and then that can hurt our customers. So for us, it was crucial that we solved for how we could fix the problem that we were having. And then there was also the piece of, I saw the answer to the poll. A lot of people were saying recruiter capacity. Well, we were facing the same thing. So on the Legacy Speedway side, we had 300 recruiters that were out at the store level recruiting, and even the 300 wasn't enough. We still weren't getting fast enough. We didn't have enough recruiter capacity. We at first added 100 recruiters on the 7-Eleven side to mimic what we were doing on the Speedway side. And that definitely helped to get the resources there. So in the end, we had about 400 folks that were in the field trying to help, and it still just wasn't enough, which is crazy to think. But in addition to that, something that was interesting, and I don't know if it's unique to us or if others had seen this as well, but it was almost a little bit harder to have accountability to our labor hours and labor optimization by operations in our stores, because there were these 400 recruiters out there helping them with some of that. And so to help create the urgency to hear back from them or to get them fully engaged could sometimes be difficult. And so it was actually a business decision first, we really want to hold our stores accountable to their labor optimization. And that includes the hiring and terminations of the staff that they have. And so then where I came into the picture is, so now we want you to oversee this as a COE, Rachel. So but prior to that, everything was handled in the field through different places, but mostly in HR. But we decided to centralize all of it and to have talent acquisition manage it as a center of excellence. And that all of that decision was made prior to, how are we actually going to enable or make that happen? So we went from having these 400 recruiters into the field to, we need to take that out of the field, and we really need our stores to own their recruitment. And hey, Rachel, you're going to oversee this now. It didn't take long for me to understand, in order to be successful, that's going to mean technology, right? That was a pretty quick analysis. I didn't have to spend a lot of time thinking, how about that side of it. But then it was like, what type of technology and what are we trying to solve for? How can we empower our store leaders to do this well, especially for those that have never done this before? How can we make it simple? How can we make it easy? How can we save them time so they're not having to spend a whole bunch of time on this? So that's the part that we had to go into. So it was, hey, we're going to make this business change. Now we're going to centralize the oversight of it as a COE. And then it was real quick on my end of, okay, I need to be able to implement some kind of technology to enable this new business model.
Was there a lot of pressure, Rachel, to use some of the existing systems? You
Absolutely.
had an acquisition, they had a different system, you had two systems, you're already trying to get it down to one. So why wasn't that an option?
Yeah. So, yeah, that was also added to complexity. Thank you for bringing that up. We were working out of two totally different tech stacks with the two different brands at the time. We are happily on one tech stack now, and that does make things a lot simpler. But there absolutely was pressure to use existing partnerships, or that we were already. And in fact, it was already in scope for one of the other tools that we were going to use. But when you really looked into it, this where it was in scope was not going to best suit what we needed from a high volume perspective. Historically, especially within the ATS space, there hasn't been a ton that really solve for that high volume piece. Historically, ATSs, you use an evergreen, it's just always on, it's this black hole, you can't get any good data, you don't know what's really going on, but that was the only way that you could facilitate that high volume. And so we wanted to think a little bit differently around this. If we were going to remove the support that the stores were used to and now have the stores accountable to doing their hiring, we wanted to make sure that the technology we provided them was actually going to be suited for them versus, historically ATSs are suited for recruiters, and especially recruiters not in the high volume space. And so, yes, there was pressure, especially because it was considered in scope. So we did have to make the business case and put dollars to the business case of ultimately it's going to pay for itself in the end by investing in this now versus not just because we considered it a sunk cost. And we were able to get creative and repurpose the dollars that were towards this, and the tool that we were already, that it was in scope for, we were able to repurpose those dollars towards some other things, which was really great. So we got to enhance that experience while then investing in a separate solution for our stores.
So Rachel, you ultimately went with a chat-based solution that moved the experience to kind of real-time engagement with candidates,
Right.
and a lot of decisioning, or not decisioning, but a lot of the process in a flow of chat with the candidate. So can you maybe describe the before and after? If I was applying to an hourly role several years ago in Rachel 11 or in 7-Eleven, what would that look like? And then what does it look like today?
Yeah, great question. So before, both on the legacy 7-Eleven and the legacy Speedway side, we were utilizing evergreens. And so we would have an always on rec. And on the 7-Eleven side, originally they actually did have to go in and then like review each one of those and try to disposition, schedule their own interviews. On the legacy Speedway side, we did have those resources that were helping with that as far as reviewing the candidates and setting up interviews, but we didn't have enough of them. We still didn't have a strong enough capacity to support that. But for our store leaders' experience, if they didn't leave an evergreen always on, they would have to go through the normal process of creating a requisition, getting the approvals, having to sort through the candidates, set up screens, set up interviews, disposition, extend the offers, all of that. And it was very time consuming. And so often the recs would sit there for several weeks when they had needs, and they'd finally get to reviewing some of those candidates. By the time they'd get to the candidate was long gone. They'd taken a job down the street. And there was a statistic that was shared with me that at the time, when candidates were applying in the 2020, 2021, 22 time frame, they were applying for 12 roles at the same time. And so if we weren't getting to them fast, They already had an offer the next day from someone down the street, and we weren't even looking at their application until 2 weeks after they had applied,
Wow.
because of the cumbersome process that it was. Today, we centrally own what we call the requisitions, and they're just always in there, but they're not on. They're not posted. They're not visible. And that is what the store leader has to do. All the store leader has to do is literally push a button. It toggles on or off. So we maintain the database of the positions, and then, but there it is available to each store, and all the store has to do is push a button. It toggles on, and then candidates show up for interviews. And the way that we did it is we set aside um, Tuesday, Thursdays from 3 to 4. I don't know if that's actually accurate, but we said when we implemented, we said these will be the days and the times for interviews. Be prepared. Just know that anyone could walk in the door for an interview that has been scheduled. So everything, 95% of the process is automated for our store leaders now, which is
Wow.
incredible.
I think you shared with me that the average, and I don't even know how you could calculate this considering you had evergreen roles in your ATS,
Yeah.
but the average went down from maybe somewhere like 11 days, close to 2 weeks, to 3 days in the new process.
Yep.
But that's brilliant, and going faster is all very well. But there were a lot of secondary benefits, arguably some of them even better than the speed piece that you managed to obtain. Can you walk us through some of those secondary benefits as you saw?
Yeah. Sure. So, and you're right. We went from, over 10 days to less than 3, and that's based on the data that we could get. I would argue it was taking us longer than 10 days to begin with. And one of the secondary benefits is access to great data. We can actually have a pulse and a feel of what's going on at the stores at any time, because if a role is turned on, we know that there's a need, so we know where the needs are at any time. And if they're turned off, we know what stores and are fully staffed. And we never had a easy picture of that before. You would have to just know store by store, and operations had a good feel of that, but from an HR perspective, talent acquisition perspective, it was difficult to get a view of that. So higher quality data, which has been really great. We saved we estimate that we saved our stores over 40,000 hours a week, which is incredible. And time is money. You can put dollars to that. And our store leaders are our true heroes. We had to, if you put yourself in their shoes, the things that they do is incredible. They are the cashier. They clean the bathrooms. They stock the shelves. They do the inventory. They are customer support. They do so much. And with limited amount of time that they're on their shift. And so by automating 95% of the process, we were able to give them back time, which is huge for our store leaders. And then we also saw from the candidate experience, it was just greatly improved, right? Our drop off went significantly down. I don't have the exact number for right now, but our candidates were actually showing up for the interviews. They were actually showing up on day one. We weren't having the ghosting problem that we were having before. And 85% of our applicants were scheduled within an hour of starting their application if they were getting an interview, which was incredible.
Would you see room for further automation? Perhaps you said 95%. Is it possible to get to 100%? Is there an appetite for that?
Yeah. I mean, that's possible. And I think that's up to each business's decision. We purposely are not automating that last mile, because we feel that that's where the human element in the process adds the most value, right? And we don't see it as removing the human completely in our experience, but instead speeding up getting our candidates to the human part of the process, where it's the most important in interaction with the employees of the store and interacting with the store leader, physically getting to understand the environment that they're going into, and getting to ask the questions around what they can expect, that type of thing. I think there's some situations where that can totally make sense, but because our candidates are customer facing and interact with our customers on a daily basis, that human interaction part of the process is still very important to us. We've just sped up getting to it. All of the other pieces up to that point were really administrative. So we automated the administrative aspect of it.
Rachel, we have a bunch of questions from our audience here. I'm going to try and rattle through a few of them. I think you'll be more than capable of taking them. I think we've answered this. David's asking, was there a time saving or data/candidate qualification experience improvement moving from a human to a chatbot? I think you shared 10 plus to 3 or sub 3 days was the immediate time saving in the hiring process for everybody. And something like 40,000 hours, I think you said, for store managers. Is that correct?
Yep, a week.
That's kind of insane, right? Related to that, a question here, I think is a good one from Bill. How long did it take to implement the new tech automation from contract signature to fully implemented? And maybe can I ask you, even before then, the scoping before that? So from startup, we need something to, this is live for everybody. What does that look like?
Yeah. So from starting of, thinking about that we were going to need this, I would say it was probably a year and a half, but the actual, okay, we've decided here's signature to fully implemented, was probably about 9 months, but it would have been much shorter. We were a big reason as to why it took as long as it did. So we have what we call the 100 days of summer. That is our busiest time of the year, as you can imagine. So during the 100 days of summer, there's just, all focus is on our stores. And so we were originally going to go live with this in our heads. We wanted to go live in May, right before summer really kicked off. So our 100 days is from Memorial Day to Labor Day. And we thought, hey, let's get this live in May prior to that so it can be used to help staff up the stores. I actually came back from what's called our in-store experience. So we all get the opportunity to work in the stores ourselves. So the timing of mine was great. I had my in-store experience and I came from that in-store experience and I said, we cannot throw this on them right now during the 100 days of summer. So went to operations, went to the business and said, we can, right? We can go live and we can make this happen, but based on the experience I just had in my in-store, what do you think? Does that make sense? And they were fully aligned of, nope, let's wait till October. So we delayed on purpose until October. So it could have gone a lot faster than what we did, but it was important to put the business needs first versus, hitting an arbitrary deadline that we had created.
And this is as much about the capabilities of tech as it is about hearts and minds, right? So knowing what your customer group internally are facing is really important. Yep. On that, Dustin's asking a question many have asked: what chat tool are you using?
We are using Paradox for our hiring at the store level, and we're using it as a full-blown ATS at the store. So I've kind of liked it from the talent acquisition side. Data-wise, it's clean. All of the data that comes out of Paradox is store level. All of the data that comes out of our ATS non-store, it's clean because it is very different, the numbers and the way you handle the KPIs in those spaces. So it's been nice to have them coming out of two different places. It makes it really clean.
I have two more for you, I promise, Rachel. I like this one from Kate, though. And rather, did Annie, generally speaking, did you have any data to suggest that candidates struggle with the chatbot as opposed to a person, or was it maybe the opposite way around?
Yeah, so we created a hotline for hypercare purposes to help support this implementation. And we on the day that we went live, it was kind of radio silence, which was crazy to me. And so we had the hotline actually start calling into the stores and say, y'all good? Everything okay? And everyone said, great experience, that we're doing fine. So then we also reached out to some of the candidates after they were hired and asked them about their experience. So we don't have actual data numbers, but we have some case studies or some stories with some of the candidates. And what we heard from them is that they really enjoyed immediate interaction. So you have to remember too, we're 24/7 operation, but we weren't recruiting 24/7 because we couldn't. Now we can. So now our recruitment is aligned to our operations of 24/7, and our candidates were loving that they were getting immediate feedback at 3 a.m. when they just gotten off their shift perhaps, or their students and they were studying and they were up late and they needed a job. And so they loved being able to speak with someone, and because it was a conversational experience, often that, we tell them this is, a chat assistant, but they seem to forget. And it's fun to watch. The conversations are very conversational, and we've actually had some of our store leaders say, oh, we really want to meet Rita. So Rita is the name of our assistant. We really want to meet Rita. When can we meet her? So the experience is one that has been very natural. It feels very comfortable. They've enjoyed talking to someone, and I think the fact that they get immediate interaction really improved the overall experience for our candidates.
I've left this last question for last because I know what your answer is going to be and I like it. So Danielle is asking, was there any data to see if attrition turnover rates went up?
No, our turnover rates actually went down. So one of the interesting things that we weren't expecting is that, we knew we were solving for speed. What we didn't realize we were solving for unintentionally was for improved quality. Because we improved the speed, we were getting to the stronger candidates faster, and we were beating our competition to those candidates. So unintentionally, we improved the quality of our hires, and in turn actually decreased the turnover that we were seeing. Turnover is still a big challenge that we are going after. We want to decrease it even more. It was great that it decreased some, but we want to see it even more. And we're now, that's kind of our next stage of things, is how do we improve our retention even more, especially at the store levels.
Right, that's a great way to end. I know our next panelist is going to be digging into fixing attrition and reducing attrition as one of the big themes, the big goals. Thank you so much for sharing this story. It's a fascinating story on serious scale for an iconic brand, Rachel. And well done to you and the team for tackling a big problem. We've tons of questions still unanswered in the Q&A, the chat. If you have any time to jump in, it'd be wonderful. But Rachel, thanks for taking the time to be with us.
Absolutely. I do want to leave with one last thing that I totally forgot to mention, Johnny. So sorry, but the even more important than the technology that you're going to use is your change management plan. And that is from upfront, from the beginning. Don't go after those shiny objects just because. Make sure you truly understand the problem that you're solving. And when you're presenting that problem to the business that you're trying to solve, make sure you're speaking in the language of those that you're presenting it to, so that they can fully wrap their arms around it. And then you're creating these champions along the way. They're cheering you on. They want you to be successful. They became a part of the process from the get-go, versus it feeling like something happening to them. It's something happening with them. And so I just cannot stress enough how important that part of the process is, regardless of the technology that you're maybe looking at. So, but thank you for the time.
That's all. It's evident from your storytelling and the way you did it that you really took that approach and jumped right in. Rachel, thanks so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.